A police dog saved his human partner from being buried alive. What he did next will break your heart. This true story of devotion and sacrifice transcends the bond between man and animal, revealing the miracle of unconditional love that we don't always understand. The sky was veiled in gray clouds that morning, as if the heavens themselves shared the grief that hung over the São Paulo Municipal Cemetery. Dozens of people dressed in black formed a circle around the polished mahogany casket, where the body of Sergeant Daniel Oliveira lay, killed in the line of duty during an operation that had ended in tragedy. The respectful silence that dominated the scene was suddenly shattered by sharp, desperate barks. Rex, the 5-year-old German shepherd, who had served as Daniel's K9 partner for 3 years, violently pulled at the leash held by Marcelo, another officer from the unit. The dog, who had been quiet beside the mourners, began to thrash uncontrollably as the casket was positioned near the open grave. "He's just grieving," an elderly woman murmured, dabbing her tears with an embroidered handkerchief. "These creatures feel it. They know when they've lost someone." But there was something different in those barks. It wasn't just sorrow. It was desperation. Urgency. Rex managed to break free from the leash and charged directly at the coffin, scratching at the wood with his front paws, leaving deep gouges in the carefully applied varnish. A chill ran down the spines of those present. The animal wasn't just displaying sadness, but a disturbing restlessness. His amber eyes, normally calm and attentive, were wide, fixed on the wooden box as if he could see right through it. The howl that followed was not merely one of pain. It carried a message that no one there could decipher. "Someone get that dog out of here," the priest requested, visibly uncomfortable with the interruption of the ceremony. 2 officers tried to pull Rex away, but the animal resisted with surprising strength. Daniel's mother, a woman with graying hair and eyes swollen from crying, watched the scene with a confused expression. "He's never acted like this before," she commented in a low voice to her husband beside her. Rex's gaze was one of pure agony. His barks turned into sharp yelps, as if he were trying to communicate something urgent, something no one there could comprehend. As the officers finally managed to pull him back a few feet, the dog kept his eyes locked on the casket, trembling visibly. A strange feeling began to wash over the mourners. This was not just a dog suffering the loss of his owner. There was something darker in his behavior. Something that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up, and their hearts beat faster. What was Rex trying to say? Daniel's colleagues stared at Rex with a mixture of compassion and embarrassment. Sergeant Pereira, who had worked with Daniel for over 10 years, tried to pull the dog by the leash, but the animal resisted with astonishing force. "Easy, boy. I know it's hard," the sergeant muttered, exchanging worried glances with the other officers. To everyone there, it seemed like just another sad chapter in the police dog's career. After all, this was the 3rd partner Rex had lost in the line of duty. He was always very attached to Daniel. Officer Mendez, one of the youngest on the force, commented quietly. "But I've never seen him react like this at the other funerals." A few officers nodded, remembering how Rex had remained quiet and downcast at the previous services, as if understanding the solemnity of the moment. This time, however, his barks echoed through the cemetery with growing desperation, interrupting the prayers and causing visible discomfort among the attendees. In the front row of chairs, Helena, Daniel's mother, sobbed uncontrollably, clinging to the arm of her husband, Antonio. Her face was red and swollen, and each of Rex's barks seemed to pierce her like a knife. "Please, someone take that dog away," she pleaded between sobs. I can't stand this noise anymore. It's like he's trying to. Antonio held her tighter, unable to complete the sentence that hung in the air. It seemed the dog was trying to say something. Something important. Something terrible. Nearby, aunts, cousins, and close family friends whispered among themselves, visibly disturbed. This isn't normal, one aunt murmured to another. They say animals can sense things we can't. A more distant cousin, who rarely attended funerals, couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. My grandmother used to say that when a dog acts like this, it's because the soul hasn't found peace. The unease spread like a wave through the crowd. Even the most seasoned officers, accustomed to scenes of violence and tragedy, began to feel restless. Lieutenant Rodriguez, Daniel's direct superior, tried to maintain his composure, but his face betrayed his concern. No one had ever witnessed a police dog behave this way before the casket of its own partner. What had begun as a respectful and solemn funeral was now steeped in an almost palpable atmosphere of tension. Rex's barks were not just expressions of grief. There was something urgent, almost accusatory in them, as if the animal were desperately trying to communicate a truth that only he knew. Commander Silveira, a man of few words and much authority, cleared his throat loudly, trying to restore order. His face flushed with embarrassment, he approached the main group and, in a controlled voice, asked everyone to ignore the dog's behavior. Please, respect the moment. Rex is just confused. Animals feel lost differently, he explained, gesturing for one of the younger officers to pull the German shepherd away from the casket. Let's continue the ceremony, as Daniel deserves. But Rex, normally obedient and disciplined, reacted in an unexpected way. When the officer tried to pull him by the leash, the animal let out a howl so deep and pained that it sent a shiver through everyone present. It was not a simple bark of protest. It sounded like a cry of despair, something visceral that transcended animal behavior. The dog thrashed, clawing at the ground, trying to get back to the casket with a determination that unnerved even the veterans of the force. His amber eyes remained fixed on the coffin with a disturbing intensity, as if he could see through the wood. I've never seen anything like it, muttered Rodrigo, an officer who had worked with K9s for over 15 years. Not even when we lost Sergeant Mendez last year. His dog was sad, but not like this. This is different. The discomfort among the mourners grew. Daniel's mother cried even harder, clutching the rosary in her trembling fingers. The uniformed colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, and even the priest seemed unable to continue the prayers in the face of the distressing scene. It was then that Marcelo, who had trained with Daniel at the academy and shared countless missions with him, stepped forward. His face pale and his voice thick with emotion, he said what many were thinking. What if we open the casket, just to be sure everything is okay? A sepulchral silence fell over the group. Commander Silveira looked at Marcelo as if he had suggested a crime. That's absurd. It's out of the question, the commander replied, his voice rising. Have you lost your mind? But other officers began to agree with Marcelo. Murmurs of support spread as Rex continued his unwavering display of distress. Maybe the dog is trying to tell us something, Marcelo insisted, holding his superior's gaze. We trust these animals to find drugs, bombs, and missing people. Why not trust him now? The air grew heavy with tension. Family and friends looked at each other, torn between the horror of the suggestion and a gnawing curiosity. The fear was palpable, almost a physical presence among them, as they all awaited the commander's final decision. A heavy silence fell over the cemetery as everyone stared at the closed casket. Their gazes shifted between Rex, who continued to bark desperately, and the commander, who stood with his arms crossed in disapproval. No one dared to make the first move, despite the growing unease. After all, protocol was clear. Sealed caskets were not to be opened, especially considering the violent circumstances of Daniel's death. "What if the body is unrecognizable?" whispered Teresa, Daniel's aunt, her voice trembling. "After that shootout, I don't know if I could bear to see my nephew like that." Other family members nodded in agreement, apprehensive. Daniel's father held his wife tightly, as if afraid she would collapse right there. The woman's face was pale, but her eyes never left the dog that continued to claw frantically at the coffin. "That dog knows something we don't," murmured Carlos, a veteran officer who had worked with Daniel for years. "I've never seen Rex act this way, and believe me, he's been to other funerals." The animal's desperation was so visceral that it began to affect even the most skeptical. When Rex let out another long, chilling howl, Marcelo, Daniel's most recent partner, stepped forward again. "With all due respect, Commander," he said, swallowing hard, "I think we need to check. If everything's normal, we'll close it again and continue with the service." Commander Silvera hesitated, but the pleading look in the eyes of Daniel's mother finally convinced him. With a reluctant nod, he gave his authorization. "Do it, and do it quickly." Marcelo and Carlos approached the casket, while family members took a few steps back. Some covered their eyes, others embraced, bracing themselves for the worst. Rex, for his part, instantly stopped barking. He sat watching intently, as if he understood exactly what was about to happen. With visibly trembling hands, Marcelo reached for the latches on the side of the coffin. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he struggled with the first one. Carlos helped with the second, breathing heavily. The metallic click of the latches being released echoed through the silent cemetery. "Ready?" Carlos asked in a low voice. Marcelo simply nodded, unable to speak. Together, they took hold of the edges of the lid and slowly began to lift. The creak of the hinges seemed to last an eternity. Everyone present held their breath at the same time, as if time itself had frozen in that very moment. The lid finally opened completely, revealing the interior of the casket. In that instant, the world seemed to stand still. The silence was so absolute you could hear the wind rustling the leaves on distant trees. The casket opened with an ominous groan, revealing what was supposed to be Daniel's face. In the same instant, a sharp scream cut through the air, sending birds scattering from the nearby trees. It was Helena, Daniel's mother, who leaned over the casket with trembling hands. "That's not him! That's not my son!" she cried, her face a mask of horror and hope. Her fingers hovered inches from the bandages covering the corpse's face. "Look at the shape of his chin, his nose. That's not Daniel." Daniel's father, Antonio, who had remained stoically silent until then, approached with faltering steps. His eyes, red from weeping, now widened in confusion. He adjusted his glasses and examined the body closely. "My God, Helena is right," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "This man is shorter than our son, and look at his hands. Daniel has had a scar on his right thumb since he was 15. Family members crowded around, some horrified, others in disbelief. Daniel's younger sister, Beatriz, who had traveled over 500 miles for the funeral, collapsed into her husband's arms. "How could they mistake my brother for someone else?" she sobbed, as a murmur grew among the crowd. Commander Silvera ran a hand over his sweaty face, trying to process what he was seeing. The mistake was unforgivable, but what did it mean? If that wasn't Daniel in the casket, then where was the officer? While chaos erupted among the humans, Rex, the German shepherd who moments before had been howling in despair, now sat calmly on his hind legs. His attentive eyes observed the scene with surprising composure, as if he had finally delivered his message. His snout, once restless and agitated, was now still, though his ears remained pricked, catching every sound, every reaction. One of Daniel's colleagues knelt beside the dog and stroked his fur. "You knew all along, didn't you, boy?" he whispered, as Rex looked back at him with those deep, intelligent eyes. The dog didn't respond, but his posture said it all. He had accomplished his mission, to reveal the truth that the humans, with all their senses and technology, had failed to see. The bond between Rex and Daniel was something that transcended human understanding, something that not even supposed death could sever. And now, in the face of this shocking revelation, a new question hung in the air, as heavy as the storm clouds beginning to gather on the horizon. If that wasn't Daniel, then who were they burying? And more importantly, where was the real Daniel? In seconds, chaos consumed the cemetery. Desperate screams echoed between the tombstones as family members recoiled in horror from the open casket. Daniel's mother, Marta, trembled uncontrollably in her husband's arms, repeating a single phrase like a mantra. "It's not him. That is not my son." His father, Antonio, fought to maintain his composure, but his eyes betrayed the raw panic gripping him. The police officers present tried to establish some semblance of order, forming a cordon around the open casket, while others attempted to calm the guests who were scattering in every direction. Commander Oliveira, a man in his 60s who rarely showed emotion, was visibly shaken. He ran a hand over his sweaty face, trying to process the impossible scene unfolding before him. "Everyone stay calm," he shouted, his voice cracking slightly. "We need space to understand this situation." Rex, now sitting beside the coffin, watched the chaos with a strange tranquility, as if his mission was complete. The dog stared intently at the commander, as if awaiting his next command. "If this isn't Daniel," muttered Sergio, Daniel's oldest partner on the force, "then who in the hell is in this coffin?" He approached cautiously, examining the bandaged face of the deceased. "Where is our friend?" The question hung in the heavy air like a storm cloud. Among the officers, gazes met, and the weight of a new reality began to settle. If a mistake this grave had been made, there was a chance, a terrifying, hopeful chance, that Daniel was still alive somewhere. Commander Oliveira finally regained his authoritative posture. "I need a team at the hospital now. Another to investigate this mistake." He hesitated, choosing his words with care. "And someone needs to stay with the family." As the officers reorganized, Marta broke away from her husband and walked directly to the commander. "My son is alive, isn't he? I always felt it." Her voice, once choked with sobs, now carried a ferocious determination. "I want to go to the hospital, now." The commander nodded, unable to deny her. In a matter of minutes, a convoy of police cruisers and private cars tore away from the cemetery, sirens slicing through the afternoon air. Inside the lead car, the commander was already on the phone with the hospital director, his voice a low growl of controlled fury. Rex, who had finally been coaxed into a vehicle, refused to leave Marta's side. The German shepherd pressed against her, a silent, steady guardian. Her hand found a strange comfort in the thick fur of his neck, As the city blurred past the windows, the 20-minute drive felt like an eternity, each second stretching under the weight of a single, silent question. If the man in the coffin wasn't Daniel, where was he? And more importantly, was he alive? Their arrival at Santa Cruz Hospital was as chaotic as the scene they had left behind. The hospital director, a pale and trembling Dr. Mendez, met them in the main lobby. "Please, what is happening?" he asked, as nurses and doctors gathered, drawn by the commotion. Commander Oliveira stepped forward, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent hall. "There has been a catastrophic error. The body we were about to bury does not belong to Sergeant Daniel Almeida." A gasp rippled through the medical staff. Dr. Mendez swallowed hard. That's impossible. We follow every identification protocol to the letter." "His dog identified the mistake," the commander stated flatly, gesturing to Rex. "The family confirmed it. We need to know who is in that coffin, and more importantly, where the real Daniel is." A frantic search of the hospital's records began. In an improvised meeting room, the head nurse's fingers flew across a keyboard. "On the night of the shootout," she explained, her voice strained, "we admitted 2 officers in critical condition. One arrived with documents damaged by blood. It was a chaotic night. Multiple victims from a highway accident came in at the same time." The director's face grew paler with each passing moment. Finally, he looked up, his expression a mask of horror. "There's been a terrible mix-up," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "One of the officers, he didn't survive surgery. The other was stabilized and placed in an induced coma." The head nurse located the final piece of the puzzle. "The officer who passed away was Andre Martins, not Daniel. We've just confirmed the fingerprints." A collective sigh of relief and horror filled the room. Marta collapsed into a chair, a sound escaping her that was half sob, half laugh. "Where is my son?" Antonio demanded, his voice thick with emotion. "Room 217, East Wing," the nurse replied. "He's in a coma, but his vitals are stable." In that instant, Rex, who had been listening with an almost human intensity, began to pull urgently on his leash, whining softly. He strained toward the hallway, his powerful sense of smell finally locking onto a familiar scent, cutting through the sterile hospital air. He knew. He had known all along. Ignoring the heated discussion that erupted between the commander and the hospital staff, the family followed the dog. Rex led them with unwavering certainty, a living compass of loyalty. He navigated the labyrinth of white corridors until he stopped abruptly before a single closed door. He sat, letting out a low, anxious whimper. When a doctor opened the door, Rex entered the room with a reverence that silenced everyone. He moved past the beeping machines and IV drips, approaching the bed where Daniel lay still and unconscious. With a gentleness that seemed impossible for such a powerful animal, he placed his front paws on the edge of the mattress, nudging his partner's motionless hand with his nose. Watching from the doorway, with tears streaming down her face, Marta whispered, "He found him. He knew." Commander Ribeiro, a man of few words and vast experience, swallowed hard. In 25 years on the force, he had never witnessed a scene so profoundly moving. Rex tilted his head and with extreme delicacy licked Daniel's limp hand, as if trying to wake him from a deep sleep. It was then that the unexpected happened. The heart monitor, which had maintained a steady, monotonous rhythm, suddenly accelerated. The doctors exchanged confused glances, quickly approaching the bed. The head nurse adjusted the sensors, assuming it was an equipment malfunction. "Don't touch him yet," the neurologist ordered, his eyes fixed on the numbers on the monitor. Something is happening. Rex continued his silent ritual, affectionately licking the officer's fingers. And then, as if answering his faithful friend's call, Daniel's fingers twitched, an almost imperceptible but real movement. The entire room held its breath. He moved his hand. Did you see that? His mother exclaimed, stepping toward her son. The doctors rushed to assess his vital signs and neurological reflexes. The neurologist shone a small flashlight into Daniel's pupils, noting a subtle but significant reaction. The medical team worked frantically, while Rex remained motionless, observing every move with canine focus. I can't explain it scientifically, the doctor admitted after a few minutes of evaluation. But it seems your son is responding to the dog's presence. It's as if something in the limbic system has been activated by the sensory stimulus. Rex, oblivious to the technical explanations, kept his gaze fixed on Daniel, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. The connection between them transcended any conventional medical understanding. In that moment, they were not just an officer and his service dog. They were two friends who refused to give up on each other. Soft light filtered through the blinds of the hospital room, casting golden stripes across the sterile environment. In the weeks following the interrupted funeral, Daniel had drifted between darkness and flashes of consciousness, like someone trying to break the surface of a deep lake. The doctors, initially skeptical, began to notice signs of more intense brain activity after Rex's visits, as if the bond between the two could awaken what medicine could not. It was on a Wednesday morning that Daniel felt something damp and warm touch his inert fingers. It wasn't the feel of the warm compresses the nurses applied, nor the touch of his family. It was different, familiar. In his semi-conscious state, he immediately recognized Rex's muzzle. The sensation brought a wave of memories. Night patrols, training in the field, nights spent sleeping on the couch with the dog at his feet. His eyes opened slowly, heavy, as if they had been sealed for years. The first image he saw was blurry but unmistakable. The brown and black fur of Rex lying beside his bed, his head resting near Daniel's hand. The animal sensed the movement, and his ears perked up, looking directly at Daniel with those brown eyes that seemed to hold all the loyalty in the world. "Rex," Daniel whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. The dog immediately got up, wagging his tail with such force that it thumped against the medical equipment. Daniel's mother, dozing in a nearby armchair, awoke with a start and let out a muffled cry when she saw her son awake. She ran to call the doctors, thick tears streaming down a face aged by recent suffering. When everyone rushed into the room, they found Daniel with a trembling hand on Rex's head. The dog stood perfectly still, as if fearing any movement might send his partner back into that deep sleep. Still dazed, Daniel heard fragments of the story. The shootout, the mistaken identity, the interrupted funeral, Rex's desperation at the cemetery. Each word was like a puzzle piece, fitting into his confused mind. Silent tears streamed down his face as he processed the truth. He had been given up for dead, but his faithful companion had never accepted it. "He knew," Daniel's father murmured, holding his son's hand. "That dog knew it wasn't you in the coffin. He saved you, son." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of reality. When he opened them again, he looked directly at Rex and, without words, thanked the friend who had refused to give up on him when everyone else had already accepted his death. The days after Daniel's awakening became a long and arduous journey of recovery. The mornings began early, with physiotherapy sessions that left him exhausted and frustrated. His once strong, agile muscles now trembled with the effort of simple movements. With each failed attempt to stand on his own, Daniel would bite his lip to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. The nights were even worse. Lying in the hospital bed, and later at home, Daniel relived the shootout in vivid nightmares. The sound of gunfire, the screams, the impact of the bullets, it all came back with terrifying clarity. He would wake up drenched in sweat, screaming the name of Andre, his partner who hadn't survived the ambush. Guilt consumed him, corroding his soul like acid. It was in those terrifying dawns that Rex became his silent savior. The German shepherd, despite his own scars from the shootout, remained vigilant by the bed. When the nightmares came, Rex would rest his head on the mattress, his amber eyes fixed on Daniel, as if to say, "I'm here. You're not alone." Sometimes, the dog would climb onto the bed, lying beside his human partner, offering the comfort of his warm presence. During physiotherapy, Rex would strategically position himself at the end of the parallel bars, as if he were the finish line Daniel needed to reach. The therapists, initially reluctant to allow the animal's presence, soon realized that Daniel's progress was significantly better when Rex was nearby. "He understands me better than any human," Daniel confessed to his mother, stroking his companion's fur. "It's like he knows exactly when I need a push and when I just need silence." Together, they also faced the grief of losing Andre. On visits to the cemetery, now with the right body in the right place, Rex would sit in respectful silence while Daniel talked to his friend's grave, telling him about his progress and promising to honor his memory. There were days when the pain seemed unbearable, when Daniel questioned if it was worth continuing the fight. In those moments, a single glance at Rex, with his unwavering loyalty and infinite patience, was enough to find the answer. The dog who had sniffed out the truth at the cemetery now sniffed out the path to recovery, guiding his human partner back to life with every bark, every lick, every look of devotion. During the long physical therapy sessions, Daniel discovered something no one had told him. Rex had also been hit that fateful night. A grazing bullet had pierced his right flank, leaving a pink scar beneath his dark fur. The veterinarian explained that the wound hadn't been severe, but the bleeding had been considerable. "He didn't even whimper when we treated him," the vet had said. "He seemed more worried about where you were than his own pain." Daniel stroked Rex's scar with trembling fingers, imagining the animal wounded, bleeding, yet still determined to find him. While he had lain unconscious in the hospital, Rex had been back on his feet, recovering with surprising speed, as if driven by an inner force. "You knew you had to find me, didn't you, partner?" Daniel whispered, a lump forming in his throat. Rex's brown eyes locked with his, filled with a deep intelligence that went beyond words. The dog tilted his head slightly, as if confirming what Daniel had said. It was incredible how, after everything they had been through, their communication had become almost telepathic. In the most difficult therapy sessions, when the pain made Daniel want to give up, he only had to look at Rex, sitting patiently in the corner of the room, to find the strength to go on. The dog never took his eyes off him, attentive to every pained expression, every tired sigh. At night, when nightmares of the shootout woke him in a cold sweat, it was the comforting weight of Rex beside him that brought him back to reality. The dog had developed a habit of lying across his numb legs, as if the warmth of his body could speed up the healing. The doctors were amazed by Daniel's recovery. "There's something special about your relationship," the physical therapist remarked one morning. watching Rex encourage Daniel to take a few more steps. It's as if he knows exactly when you need a push and when you need comfort. Daniel knew it was true. The bond between them, already strong before the incident, had transformed into something almost mystical. They were two survivors, bound by scars both visible and invisible, two warriors who communicated in their own language of glances, touches, and a mutual understanding that needed no words. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" Daniel murmured one afternoon, as they rested after a particularly grueling session. Rex responded by resting his muzzle on Daniel's hand, his eyes fixed on his, as if to say, "Always have been, always will be." After 6 months of intensive physical therapy, Daniel was finally cleared to return to work. He still walked with a slight limp in his right leg, where 2 bullets had lodged during the ambush, but his determination was greater than any physical limitation. On his first day back, Rex entered the precinct by his side, head held high, as if escorting a king. The main hall of the station was decorated with a makeshift banner that read, "Welcome back, Daniel and Rex." Colleagues who normally maintained a serious demeanor couldn't contain their emotion. Many came forward to hug him, while others knelt to pet Rex, who accepted the affection with dignity, but never took his eyes off his human partner. "You two are the definition of a miracle," said Commander Oliveira, handing Daniel his police badge, carefully polished for the occasion. "The force is proud to have you back." During the small welcome ceremony, the commander announced that Daniel would be promoted to sergeant and transferred to an administrative role, where he could recover fully without the risks of street duty. The whole room applauded, except for Daniel, who remained silent, exchanging a look with Rex. "With all due respect, sir," he said, when the applause died down, "I'd prefer to stay with the K9 unit." A murmur went through the room. Commander Oliveira furrowed his brow. "Are you sure, Daniel? You've been through a lot. No one would question you for choosing a safer path now." Daniel knelt, stroking Rex's head. The dog gently nudged his hand with his muzzle. "This dog found me when everyone thought I was dead. He sensed my presence when I didn't even know if I was alive." Daniel paused, controlling the emotion in his voice. "I can't just abandon the streets and leave him with another partner. We're a team, to the end." The silence that followed was broken by a visibly moved Commander Oliveira. "Well, it seems I have no choice. The K9 unit keeps its best duo." That same afternoon, Daniel and Rex returned to their patrol routine, albeit with lighter duties at first. As they walked through the neighborhood, residents waved. Some approached to share how they had followed their story in the news. Daniel smiled politely, but his gaze remained alert, as if a new threat could be hiding around any corner. Rex, for his part, walked with the same discipline as always, but now with an even more acute sense of protection. At any suspicious movement, his ears would perk up, and his body would subtly position itself between Daniel and the potential danger. The bond between them had transcended police training. It was now a matter of shared destiny. Rex's fame spread through the city like wildfire. On the streets, people would point and whisper when the pair passed by. "That's him, the dog who discovered the mistake at the funeral." Children, fascinated by the story that had been passed from person to person, would line up in front of the station just to see the German Shepherd, whom many now called the four-legged detective. Some brought colorful drawings depicting Rex as a canine superhero, complete with a cape, while others asked to take pictures with the animal who had become a local celebrity. The neighborhood merchants, touched by the story of loyalty, began a quiet tradition. Every morning, when Daniel and Rex arrived for their shift, they would find special treats left at the station entrance. Rawhide bones from Mr. Antonio's butcher shop, homemade biscuits from Mrs. Maria's bakery, and even new toys from the pet store down the street. A simple note accompanied the offerings. For the city's hero. Daniel observed the commotion with a mix of pride and concern. He sometimes joked that Rex would have to go on a diet with so many treats, but deep down, he knew the recognition was more than deserved. At home, he carefully saved every drawing, every letter of thanks that arrived, unknowingly creating a small museum to the friendship between a man and his dog. Despite all the attention, Rex remained surprisingly humble. He showed no special interest in camera flashes or the pets from strangers. His focus remained on one thing and one thing only: Daniel. Even during impromptu photo shoots with smiling children, his watchful eyes would always return to his partner, as if checking to see if he was all right, if he needed anything. One afternoon, during a talk on safety at a primary school, a little girl asked Daniel if Rex knew he was famous. The officer smiled before answering. "I think, for him, the only thing that matters is being by my side." And it was true. While people saw a hero, Rex seemed to understand that his true reward wasn't in the extra treats or the praise from admirers, but in the unshakable partnership he had built with Daniel. At night, far from the makeshift spotlights, he was just a dog lying at the foot of the bed, breathing peacefully, ever alert to his human's slightest movement, as if still standing guard against any danger that might threaten him again. As the investigation into the hospital error progressed, Daniel found himself drawn into a plot far larger than he could have imagined. 3 weeks after his discharge, he was summoned to the chief's office, where he found a stack of files on the desk. They were 5 other cases of patient misidentifications at the same hospital over the last 2 years. In 2 of them, families had held wakes and buried bodies that did not belong to their loved ones. "This isn't a coincidence, Daniel. It's systematic negligence," the chief explained, running his fingers over the documents. "And you are the only living victim who can help us unravel this scheme." Though still recovering physically, with constant pain in his shoulder and nightmares that woke him in a cold sweat, Daniel agreed to cooperate. Rex, ever observant, seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, remaining more vigilant than ever by his partner's side during the long meetings with prosecutors and investigators. The case took on a new dimension when a former nurse from the hospital appeared at his doorstep. Trembling and visibly frightened, she revealed that she had been fired for questioning the identification procedures for critical patients. "They cut corners where they shouldn't," she confessed, stroking Rex, who watched her with curiosity. "They reduced the identification and documentation staff. In the emergency room, especially at night, there's often just one employee to process all the admissions." Daniel recorded her testimony and handed it over to the authorities. His police training proved invaluable in organizing the evidence and helping his colleagues conduct a meticulous investigation. On one particularly difficult afternoon, after giving an exhaustive deposition to the district attorney, Daniel ran into 3 officers at the station who had also lost partners in the line of duty. One of them, Marcelo, embraced him tightly. "If it weren't for you and this incredible dog, we might never have known my brother's body could be in the wrong place," he said, his voice choked with emotion. The investigation uncovered a pattern of alarming institutional neglect. The hospital had drastically cut its budget for staff training and safety protocols. While directors received bonuses for operational efficiency, patients were treated as numbers on a spreadsheet. For Daniel, Each new testimony, each new discovery was painful but necessary. At night, when he returned home exhausted, he found comfort only in the silent presence of Rex, who seemed to perfectly understand the weight of their mission. Together, they were helping to prevent other families from enduring the same nightmare. One autumn morning, Daniel and Rex were returning from a quiet patrol when the patrol car's radio crackled with an urgent dispatch. A 7-year-old girl, Julia, had been missing for over 5 hours in Jardim Esperança, a neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Her frantic parents reported she had been playing in the yard and had simply vanished. Daniel exchanged a look with Rex, who was already agitated in the back seat, as if sensing the gravity of the call. When they arrived, they found a mother in tears and dozens of neighbors forming makeshift search parties. Daniel noticed Rex sniffing the air with an unusual intensity. After catching the scent of the girl's pajamas, the German shepherd began to pull firmly on his leash, following a trail invisible to human eyes. "He's on to something," Daniel explained to the mother, Sandra, who clung to this hope like a castaway to a piece of driftwood. The dog guided them through narrow alleys, across vacant lots, and finally stopped before an abandoned warehouse nearly 2 miles from the family's home. The place seemed empty, but Rex wouldn't stop barking at a pile of debris in the corner. Daniel radioed for backup and cautiously approached. That's when he heard a muffled cry. With his heart pounding, he moved aside planks of wood and pieces of metal, revealing a small space where Julia was huddled, frightened, but alive. "Mister, the doggy really found me," the little girl whispered between tears and a shy smile as Daniel carried her out. Rex wagged his tail, staying alert until they were safe. When they returned to the street, Sandra ran to her daughter, sobbing with relief. Neighbors applauded, some cried, others filmed the scene with their phones. Daniel later learned that the kidnapper had fled upon hearing the sirens, abandoning the girl in the hideout. That night, the precinct was flooded with calls from residents wanting to say thank you. A local bakery promised to deliver fresh biscuits for Rex every morning. A school invited the pair to speak about safety. The rescue made the local news, with a picture of Rex licking Julia's face splashed across the front page. For Daniel, however, the most important thing was seeing that flame of purpose rekindled in Rex's eyes. Since the hospital incident, something between them had changed, deepened into a shared mission. As he stroked his partner's ears in the quiet of the patrol car, Daniel realized they had both found a new reason to be on the streets together, protecting lives and restoring hope. 5 years had passed since that day in the cemetery. Daniel and Rex had become inseparable, not just as partners on the force, but as living symbols of what true loyalty means. On the city streets, people would point as their patrol car passed. "Look, there's the officer who came back from the dead and his hero dog." Children would wave, the elderly would smile in admiration, and even the toughest criminals showed a certain respect when confronted by the pair. At the precinct, their story was told to every new recruit in the K-9 unit. "Watch these two closely," the commander would say during introductions. "They are proof that our intuition, our deepest instincts, can make the difference between life and death." Many rookie officers asked to ride along with Daniel and Rex, hoping to absorb some of the almost supernatural connection that existed between them. Daniel's physical scars had faded with time. Physical therapy and daily exercise had restored nearly all of his mobility. The emotional scars, however, remained. On stormy nights, he would still wake with a start, drenched in a cold sweat, reliving the shootout in his nightmares. In those moments, Rex was always there, resting his head on his lap, offering silent comfort until his partner's breathing returned to normal. The family of Andre, the partner who had truly died that fateful day, became a part of Daniel's life. Sundays often found them at a backyard barbecue, sharing stories and keeping the memory of their lost friend alive. Rex, ever watchful, would play with the children while the adults talked of good times and plans for the future. The hospital negligence case resulted in significant changes to the victim identification system across the region. Daniel frequently gave talks on the subject, not with bitterness, but with the determination of someone who wanted to ensure no one else would suffer the same fate. Pain teaches us, he would say, but it's up to us to turn it into something that helps others. One autumn morning, while walking in the park on their day off, a reporter asked Daniel what his secret was for overcoming so much adversity. He smiled, stroking Rex's now graying head, and answered simply, "When you have someone who never gives up on you, even when everyone else has, you find the strength to keep going, no matter how hard the road gets." Today, Daniel and Rex remain the most respected duo on the force. Every morning, they walk through the precinct doors together, greeting colleagues with the same dedication as always. Time has left a few gray strands in Daniel's beard and white patches on Rex's muzzle, but the light in their eyes remains undimmed, as if the miracle that bound them had frozen something essential within them. On the city streets, they are not just officers doing their duty, they are guardians of stories. They stop to listen to Mrs. Maria's complaints at the bakery, check if Mr. Joaquim is taking his medicine correctly, and even help children cross the street to school. The fame of being heroes never made them arrogant. On the contrary, the experience of nearly losing everything taught them to value every small moment. Commander Ribeiro, on the verge of retirement, often remarks that he has never seen such a symbiotic partnership in his 30 years on the force. They communicate without words, he tells the rookies. Rex understands Daniel before he even gives a command. It's no exaggeration. A single look, a subtle gesture, and the dog knows exactly what to do, as if they can read each other's minds. The scar on Daniel's chest, a permanent reminder of the 3 bullets that nearly killed him, no longer aches as it once did. He shows it with pride during his talks at schools, telling the story of how Rex smelled the truth when everyone else believed he was dead. "My friend sensed that I was alive somewhere," he always says, his voice thick with emotion as he pets his faithful companion's head. Just last week, they helped crack a complex trafficking case that had seemed impossible. While other officers were looking for technological leads, it was Rex's instinct that led them to an underground hideout. Daniel trusted his partner's intuition completely, even when his superiors questioned it. They were right, as always. At night, in the simple house they share in the suburbs, their routine is sacred. Daniel prepares dinner while Rex rests on the porch, ever vigilant even in his downtime. Later they sit together on the sofa to watch a movie, though the dog always falls asleep within the first few minutes. Daniel smiles, watching his friend snore peacefully, knowing they will both be ready for another day of work at dawn. What began as a story of loss had transformed into the purest example of how loyalty can transcend all limits. It wasn't just Rex who saved Daniel that day. They saved each other, proving that even in the darkest of times, love can be the miracle we all need to move forward.